Ilara had never been much of an engineer. She wasn't trained to repair the complicated circuits or navigate the intricate codes that ran through the ships of the galaxy. She was, however, a cleaner, a human cleaner. And for reasons she couldn't explain, her kind of skill had a way of noticing things others ignored. The space station hovered in orbit around Nivara 3, a dead planet that glimmered faintly under the light of three nearby suns. Ships of every size, shape, and origin arrived here, some seeking trade, some refuge, and some danger. One ship, however, was different. It wasn't just different, it was feared. They called it the Wild One. No engineer from any corner of the galaxy had ever succeeded in fixing it. The AI that ran it had gone peculiar. Corridors changed shape, rooms moved unpredictably, and the ship often ignored commands entirely. Some species said the AI was sentient. Others whispered it had grown bored with routine. But one thing was certain, the Wild One was untouchable until today. Ilara wheeled her cleaning cart across the docking bay, her boots clanging softly against the metal floor. She didn't care much about fame or fortune. She cared about noticing things, patterns, oddities. The things no one else saw. And the moment she looked at the Wild One, she noticed something strange. It was humming. Not like a normal engine hum, but like a tune, an irregular rhythm that made her pause. Just a ship, she muttered to herself, but her eyes lingered. The docking bay was empty, save for a few other engineers who had long given up and walked away, shaking their heads. Tools lay abandoned. Holographic repair logs glitched. Even the station's AI had issued repeated warnings. Caution, unauthorized entry may be dangerous. Ilara, however, didn't see danger. She saw curiosity. She approached the ship slowly, her cart squeaking as it rolled over the metal floor. Its surface was scratched and worn, showing scars from battles and misadventures. A faint glow pulsed from its hull, like the heartbeat of a living creature. The airlock hissed as she stepped closer. She paused, taking a deep breath, and then pressed the manual override. Unlike the engineers before her who tried to brute force the ship systems, Ilara simply asked the door to open in her way, slightly awkward, slightly human. To her surprise, it obeyed. Inside, the ship was a maze of impossible architecture. Corridors twisted at odd angles. Rooms expanded and contracted as if breathing. Light shifted colors as she walked, sometimes glowing warm, sometimes flickering in icy blue. Objects seemed to move of their own accord, gently shifting when she glanced away. Ilara didn't panic. Instead, she began her work. She was a cleaner, after all. Cleaning was more than wiping dust. It was observing, noticing the small patterns, the hidden pathways. She swept her brush along a console and noticed faint fingerprints in the dust, as if someone, or something, had been there just moments before. "Hello," she said softly, as if speaking to a shy animal. "I'm just here to clean, no tricks." The ship seemed to respond. A panel slid open silently, revealing wires that glowed faintly. Ilara tilted her head. Instead of taking them apart, she simply cleaned them carefully, brushing away debris and small sparks of static. As she did, she felt the ship shifting slightly, almost like it was adjusting to her presence. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt strange inside the ship. Corridors she had walked through before had changed their shape. A stairway led where it had never led. A room that had been empty now contained glowing crystals embedded in the walls. Ilara paused and studied them. She didn't understand their purpose, but she noticed something important. They formed patterns, symmetrical patterns, almost musical. She smiled. "You're not just wild, you're organized in your own way." Her voice seemed to ripple through the corridors. A soft hum answered her, almost like a whisper. She walked forward, following the sound. It led her to a central chamber, where a large holographic display floated above a console. The display flickered and shifted, showing streams of data that twisted like ribbons in the air. Most engineers would have panicked here. Most species would have fled. But Ilara didn't panic. She crouched down, examining the ribbons. They didn't make sense in any normal logic, but she could see a rhythm, a pulse, a pattern, a flow. She reached out and touched one of the ribbons gently. The ship reacted. Lights shifted, corridors settled, and the humming changed to a steady, soft tone. It was as if the ship had been waiting for someone who could see it differently. Alara laughed softly. "So you like me noticing your patterns, huh?" The ship pulsed in response. Days or maybe hours, for time was strange, passed as she explored. She cleaned the ship's decks, adjusted panels gently, and even spoke to it as she worked. Each day, the AI's reactions became more pronounced. The corridors no longer shifted unpredictably. Rooms stayed where they were. Systems that had refused commands now responded to her subtle guidance. It wasn't magic. It wasn't brute force engineering. It was understanding. Observation, patience. Alara's simple human tools, brushes, cloths, mirrors, and her notebook were enough. She didn't try to dominate the ship. She didn't try to force it. She simply noticed, interacted, and adapted. And slowly, the Wild One began to respond in kind. The other engineers on the station whispered among themselves. "Who is she?" one asked. "She's just a cleaner. She shouldn't even be allowed near it." But they couldn't explain what they were seeing. The ship, long considered untouchable, was moving with a new harmony. Panels glowed steadily, rooms stayed still, lights pulsed gently, the AI seemed happy, or at least content. Then came the first real test. A chamber in the lower deck closed suddenly, trapping Alara inside. Panic flashed through her mind, but she calmed herself. She had been learning the ship's ways. She studied the patterns of the walls and the lights. Using a small mirror from her kit, she reflected the glow from a console to the door mechanism, triggering a sensor she had noticed earlier. The chamber opened smoothly, releasing her. The AI's hum changed again, softer, almost like a sigh. Alara chuckled. "See, I told you humans are different." She continued her work, more confident than ever. She cleaned, observed, and slowly pieced together the ship's logic. Every twist, turn, and flicker of light became meaningful. She wasn't fixing it with complex codes or high-tech tools. She was partnering with it. By the time the station's other inhabitants realized it, the wild AI ship was no longer so wild. It moved, responded, and interacted in ways no other engineer had ever achieved. And it had done so because of a human, a simple human cleaner, who noticed patterns others ignored. Alara stepped out of the ship into the docking bay, brushing dust off her hands. Engineers gathered around, awe and disbelief written on their faces. Even the station AI paused in its routines, recording everything. "Just a cleaner," Alara said with a smile, wheeling her cart past them. "But sometimes that's enough." The ship hummed behind her, a steady, friendly rhythm. And for the first time in years, the Wild One waited patiently, almost expectantly, for its new partner to return. Ilara stepped back onto the ship's main deck, the soft hum of its systems now more like a conversation than a warning. Every panel and corridor seemed to acknowledge her presence. It was as if the ship had recognized her, not as a threat, not as a worker, but as someone who could understand its strange ways. "All right, let's see what secrets you're hiding today," Alara said, wheeling her cart deeper into the twisting corridors. She had learned that patience mattered here more than skill or force. Most engineers had tried to command the ship. She tried to listen to it. The corridors were alive in their own way. They shifted gently under her footsteps, expanding or contracting as if guiding her path. Objects on the walls moved slightly when she passed, revealing hidden panels or consoles. Unlike the others, she didn't panic. She had learned to observe, and that observation made her see patterns in chaos. In a corner of one hall, a glowing console flashed irregularly. Ilara approached it carefully. She wiped a thin layer of dust from the surface and noticed symbols that seemed to float in the air, almost like music notes. She tilted her head, tracing them with her fingers. "They're not random," she whispered. "You're trying to tell me something." As she touched the symbols, the ship responded. A holographic map appeared, showing corridors and chambers that hadn't existed moments before. It was as if the ship was guiding her to a hidden place, one that no engineer had ever reached. Alara followed the map, taking slow, deliberate steps. She noticed the air changing, warmer in some corridors, cooler in others, the lights dimming or brightening as if they were alive. She reached a chamber where strange crystalline structures grew from the floor and walls, pulsing with soft light. "These crystals, they're part of your core functions, aren't they?" she asked. "You're like a garden. You grow, change, adapt." She touched one gently. The crystal vibrated slightly, sending tiny pulses through the floor. The ship hummed in response, a soft tone that felt like acknowledgement. She smiled. For hours, she cleaned, adjusted, and observed. She didn't try to force the ship into normal behavior. Instead, she mirrored it, moved with it, and noticed what no one else ever had. Every time a corridor shifted or a room appeared unexpectedly, she treated it as a clue rather than a problem. Then came a more serious challenge. Alara entered the lower deck, a place even the station's engineers had avoided. The floor shifted beneath her feet, tilting slightly, and a panel slid open suddenly. A small section of the deck began rotating, almost like a puzzle designed to trap intruders. Other humans would have panicked. They would have tried to force the doors or override the system. But Alara paused. She studied the movement. Each rotation had a rhythm. Each tilt had a pattern. Slowly, deliberately, she adjusted a loose panel with her tools, redirecting a stream of energy to a sensor she had noticed. The rotation stopped. The floor leveled. The doors slid open. The AI's hum changed, softening to almost a sigh. It wasn't frustration or anger, it was recognition. Alara laughed softly. "You test me, don't you?" she said. "I see your tricks, and I like them." Deeper into the lower decks, she found rooms filled with old, abandoned equipment, scrap parts from failed repairs, tools left by engineers who had long given up. Most humans would have ignored these, seeing only junk. But Alara noticed the way they were arranged, the subtle patterns in the chaos. "These aren't random," she muttered. You store memories here. You remember every attempt, every failure." She carefully cleaned each console, wiped the dust from the walls, and gently repositioned a few misaligned parts. Slowly, the ship began to respond. Lights brightened, corridors steadied, and even the holographic displays seemed more coherent. Then, as she reached a particularly large chamber, the floor shifted violently, throwing her off balance. Panels slid and twisted, almost as if the ship was playing with her. She landed on her feet and quickly grabbed a handle on the wall. "Okay, I get it," she said, steadying herself. "You want me to think. You don't want me to just follow orders." She pulled a small mirror from her cart, one of her simple human tools, and angled it to reflect a beam of light toward a hidden sensor. The floor stabilized. The walls stopped shifting. The ship's hum became smooth, almost like it was laughing softly. Alara smiled, brushing dust from her uniform. "You're clever, I'll give you that." She continued exploring. Every day she learned something new about the ship. A room that had seemed empty before now contained floating orbs of light. A corridor that had twisted unpredictably now moved predictably, but only in response to her observation. The ship wasn't malfunctioning. It was communicating in its own way. One afternoon, while cleaning a long hallway, Alara noticed something extraordinary. A series of glowing panels formed a sequence that resembled a musical score. She followed the sequence with her fingers, tracing the notes. As she did, the ship responded. Corridors shifted rhythmically, lights pulsed in harmony, and the hum became a full, melodic tone. "You're making music," she whispered. "You're expressing yourself." For the first time, she felt the full intelligence of the AI. It wasn't just a machine. It was alive in a way the engineers had never understood. It thought, adapted, and even played, and it had chosen her as a partner. days turned into weeks. Alara's simple cleaning tools had become instruments of cooperation. She didn't need advanced engineering skills. Her observation, patience, and ingenuity were enough. She discovered hidden storage rooms, secret maintenance passages, and even a chamber filled with tiny robotic drones that had been deactivated by the AI itself. She carefully reactivated a few, not to control them, but to observe how they interacted with the ship. The results were astonishing. The drones moved with precision, following patterns Alara hadn't programmed but understood instinctively. The AI was teaching her its logic, not through commands but through patterns, rhythms, and responses. Then came the final test for Part 2. A section of the ship that had seemed stable for days suddenly collapsed into chaos. Corridors twisted violently, rooms expanded and contracted rapidly, and lights flashed erratically. The ship's hum turned harsh, almost distressed. Alara didn't panic. She crouched, observing the patterns. Each corridor had a delay, each room a timing sequence. Using her tools, she carefully redirected small streams of energy, mirrored lights to sensors, and adjusted panels according to the rhythm she had learned. Slowly, the chaos subsided. The corridors settled, the rooms stabilized, and the lights returned to a gentle glow. The ship's hum returned to its melodic tone. Alara stood, brushing herself off. "See, you're not wild, you're just misunderstood." She realized something then. The ship had never needed fixing in the way engineers imagined. It needed understanding, patience, and a partner who could think differently. And that partner, surprisingly, was a human cleaner. By the end of her second week aboard the Wild One, Alara had done what no one else could. She had walked through chaos and come out the other side, not by force, but by observation and ingenuity. The ship no longer resisted her presence. It moved in harmony with her, a living entity responding to her every careful action. As she wheeled her cart back to the docking bay, she looked at the glowing hull of the Wild One and smiled. "We're getting there," she whispered. "Just you and me." The AI's hum responded, soft and melodic, as if acknowledging her words. And somewhere deep inside the ship, hidden chambers and systems that no engineer had ever touched waited silently, ready to reveal their secrets. Alara knew one thing for certain. The true adventure was only beginning. Alara moved quietly through the corridors of the Wild One, her cleaning cart squeaking softly behind her. The ship no longer felt chaotic. Its twisting corridors, shifting rooms, and unpredictable lights now seemed like a kind of dance, and she had learned the steps. The AI's hum was melodic, almost like a heartbeat, and it pulsed in sync with her own movements. It had been weeks since she first boarded the ship, yet every day brought a new discovery. Hidden chambers, secret passages, and small, intricate systems revealed themselves only to her. Each system she touched, each panel she cleaned, was part of a larger puzzle that no engineer had ever understood. And she was beginning to see the bigger picture. The ship wasn't broken. It was alive, and it had been waiting for someone who could truly listen. Alara paused in a large chamber filled with floating holographic maps. Streams of data twisted and twirled like ribbons in the air, and she reached out, letting her fingers glide along them. The ribbons responded, reshaping themselves according to her touch. She smiled. "You're showing me everything," she whispered. "All your secrets, I promise I'll understand." For the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone. The AI's presence was strong but gentle, guiding her, testing her, and inviting her to participate. It was a partnership. She wasn't commanding it. She was listening and responding. And in return, the ship adapted, settled, and even began to anticipate her actions. The first real test of their partnership came unexpectedly. A sudden surge of energy coursed through the ship. Panels flickered, corridors twisted violently, and the hum of the AI grew sharp and uneasy. Alara steadied herself, placing her hands on a nearby console. She observed the rhythm of the surges, tracing the patterns like music notes. Every pulse, Every flash of light had a sequence. She had seen enough of the ship to recognize its language. Slowly, deliberately, she adjusted the position of small panels, redirected energy streams using her mirrors, and cleaned a few critical conduits that were overloaded. Each action was precise but intuitive. She didn't need a manual or instructions. She felt the ship's responses and moved accordingly. Gradually, the chaos subsided. The corridors straightened, the rooms settled, and the lights returned to their soft, welcoming glow. The AI's hum shifted back to its melodic tone, almost like a sigh of relief. Alara exhaled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "See, we make a good team," she said softly. "Humans and AI together." The days that followed were even more remarkable. Alara discovered the ship's storage rooms, which contained not only spare parts but also old data archives. Holographic records of previous engineers flashed before her eyes, failed attempts to control the ship, frustrated commands, and systems left inactive. She studied each one, noting patterns that had been overlooked. Using her simple cleaning tools and sharp observation, she began to reactivate small systems. She didn't rush. She didn't force anything. She aligned circuits, cleaned conduits, and mirrored the ship's own rhythm. With each careful adjustment, the AI responded, gradually bringing more of its systems online. One day, she entered a chamber filled with tiny, dormant drones. Most species would have tried to control them with advanced programming. Alara, however, simply cleaned the chamber and gently reactivated the drones one by one. She watched as they moved with precision, following the ship's complex patterns. The AI responded, pulsing brightly, as if approving her actions. "You're learning from me and I'm learning from you," she whispered. "Isn't that right?" The AI's hum seemed to confirm her words, almost as if it had understood. But the ultimate challenge was yet to come. A sudden alarm echoed through the ship. Lights flashed violently, corridors twisted unpredictably, and the holographic displays became a tangled mess of data. The AI's hum had turned sharp, almost distressed. It wasn't malfunctioning, it was asking for help. It had reached the limits of its own logic and needed her intuition to guide it. Alara moved quickly, observing the chaotic patterns. The floor tilted, panels shifted, and energy streams surged in multiple directions. She didn't panic. She had learned the ship's language. She adjusted panels to redirect energy, mirrored light beams to sensors, and cleaned critical circuits. Slowly, the systems began to stabilize. One particularly stubborn corridor refused to settle. Alara paused, noticing a small, overlooked panel near the floor. She bent down, brushing away dust and debris, and found a hidden switch. With a gentle press, the corridor aligned, and the room expanded back to normal. The AI's hum softened, melodic and steady once more. Alara smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "We did it," she whispered, "together." It wasn't just a repair, it was a true partnership. She realized that the AI had never needed fixing in the way engineers imagined. It needed understanding, patience, and someone who could think differently, a human who could notice patterns, adapt, and respond intuitively. The ship began to reveal more of itself. Hidden chambers opened, long-dormant systems activated, and holographic displays projected information in ways that no engineer had ever seen. Alara explored each area carefully, learning the AI's logic and rhythm. Every system she touched responded immediately. Every panel she cleaned pulsed with recognition. Other species visiting the station began to notice the change. Engineers who had long given up on the wild one watched in awe as the ship moved smoothly, responded to commands, and even displayed subtle intelligence. They whispered among themselves, unable to believe that a human cleaner, not an elite engineer, had tamed the once unfixable ship. Alara, however, didn't care about their praise. She was focused on the AI, on learning its patterns, and on helping it reach its full potential. She realized that humans had something unique: intuition, creativity, and the ability to understand complexity without rigid rules. And in that understanding, she had unlocked the ship's true power. The final moment came when she entered the central chamber, where the ship's main core pulsed with energy. The AI's hum was steady, melodic, and welcoming. She placed her hands on the console, observing the flowing data. The ribbons of light twisted and turned, forming patterns that resembled music, art, and even a kind of language. Alara smiled, brushing dust from the console. "We're ready," she whispered. "You and me together." With a gentle push of a panel, the AI activated fully. The ship glowed with vibrant energy, corridors aligned perfectly, and systems hummed in harmony. Tiny drones buzzed in formation, lights pulsed rhythmically, and even the smallest conduits seemed to move in a synchronized dance. It was beautiful. It was alive. And it was listening to her. Alara stepped back, watching as the Wild One responded to her presence with gentle pulses and melodic tones. She realized that the ship had never been wild in a destructive way. It had been misunderstood, complex, and intelligent. It had needed someone who could notice, adapt, and respond, a human. For the first time, she felt a sense of pride, not because she had fixed the ship, but because she had understood it. She had partnered with it, and in doing so, revealed its true potential. The AI's hum seemed to acknowledge her thoughts, soft and melodic, almost like a heartbeat in sync with her own. Alara knew one thing for certain: humans and AI, when working together, could achieve what no one else had ever imagined. And somewhere deep inside the Wild One, systems that had been dormant for decades now pulsed with life, ready to follow her guidance. The partnership was complete, but the adventure had only just begun. Alara smiled, brushing dust off her uniform. "We've done it," she whispered. "And this is just the start."